Ben Riggs presents Reading D&D Aloud. Episode 48, Sword and Sorcery in School, with Dr. Jason Ray Carney.
Greetings, fellow humans. Here I am, Ben Riggs, podcaster, historian extraordinaire. And with me is Jason Carney. I should say Dr. Carney, shouldn't I?
That works. Yeah, I won't hold it against you if you don't use that. Uh,
So what is how would you describe your job?
well, I'm an English professor. I teach in the English department. Um, I I was hired to teach the history of literary criticism, which doesn't sound all that exciting. It's like an 18th century topic, but we used to call it literary theory, um, but it's basically the history of the canon, right? What what is the nature of the literary canon? Uh, is it a storehouse of eternal value, or is it just the you know preferences of a specific class of people? Those are the questions. And so, of course, I'm interested. I sometimes say I teach popular literature because we end up talking a lot about popular literature in my classes. Um,
And what kind of popular literature would be most relevant possibly to listeners of this podcast?
a lot of it would be the Appendix N writers, pulp fiction in general. Uh, Between the wars, pulp fiction or weird tales writer, the weird tales writers. I wrote an academic monograph on Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard and Clark Ashton Smith. So
So for again, I have some listeners that are 12 years old. Um, If you don't know, Appendix N is the appendix to the first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Dungeon Master's Guide, where D&D co-creator Gary Gygax lays out his literary inspirations. Uh, it's become a probably a mythical text unto its own. Certainly, I would say in most D&D circles, you can say Appendix N and roll on without explaining what it is. Perhaps you would argue it has become a canon unto itself, sir. I don't know, but
yeah.
is there anything you would add to that description of Appendix N?
Oh, well, I just said I wrote it. I used I've referred to Clark Ashton Smith, and he's technically not an Appendix N author, but a lot of people kind of roll him into that world. Why I think on an older podcast you did a podcast on why isn't Clark Ashton Smith an Appendix N podcaster? Why isn't Clark Ashton Smith in the Appendix N?
I think we had you on to talk about that a few years ago, but yeah, I think
Yeah.
we talked about that.
Mhm.
And it's interesting because like I picked up a Clark Ashton Smith Penguin edition, and I read one or two stories, and I just couldn't get into it.
Mhm.
I don't know why it missed me because again,
Very syrupy. He uses a lot of adjectives and esoteric words and uh,
but so does like Robert E. Howard. In the main, I enjoy Robert E. Howard until he stumbles into some things that are kind of icky. But
yeah.
like, you know, I think this is a quote that I think I'm gonna try it out a lot in my future life. Victor Laval, who wrote the Ballad of Black Tom, which is,
Mhm. Oh,
a
that's a good one.
modern take on the Lovecraft mythos by an African American author. He likes to point out that Lovecraft's best work is also his least racist. And I kind of feel that way with Robert E. Howard. Like
Mhm.
I really like Tower of the Elephant, which I'll read from a little bit here, and there's a little casual misogyny, but like,
Mhm.
it I don't know that it really puts the ick on me the way sometimes his misogyny does.
Oh
Uh
yeah.
Pardon me.
There's some interwar um eugenics, some ethnic stereotypes, and not just Robert E. Howard's work, but a lot of between the wars pulp fiction. They used it. This is not a defense of their storytelling, but a lot of these writers used it as like a shorthand, as like a way of quick characterization. That's like one hospitable way of thinking about it. But it's some of for example, I like Robert E. Howard, but I don't assign him in my class because I don't want my students, an 18, 19-year-old to read that, and I don't know. That's a larger conversation. But
So, but Howard and Lovecraft both certainly believed that more words was better writing to some degree. But yeah, again, there was something about Clark Ashton Smith that I just bounced off of. So,
Hmm.
what it would surprise me if it was that, because I kind of don't mind
Hmm.
that. Like if you're operating at a high level, uh, using bizarre words in fascinating ways, I'm kind of there for it.
Yeah,
So yeah, I couldn't explain why I bounced off of Clark Ashton Smith.
there is very little of a human element in it.
Hmm.
His also his characters are usually spectators of like spectacles and victims, so like bad things just happen to them. But it isn't like horror where like the tension is being built. It's more just like the characters are just in this they're paralyzed and horrible things are happening to them. It's a really interesting way of it's like the opposite of pulp storytelling. It's interesting that he's in the pulps, but he actually he started as a literary artist, as a poet. So it kind of makes sense, like the poet is just this when you write a poem, you're basically like providing, visual image after visual image after visual image, and that's what he does in his pulp stories. He had to be encouraged to submit fiction by some of his mentors. George Sterling was one of them. He thought it was like he was really pretentious. Clark Ashton Smith was like he kind of felt like he was slumming it by writing pulp fiction. Um, but yeah, there's a lot there with Clark Ashton Smith, and so and I don't think you're unique in bouncing off of him. A lot of people are like, don't. But I have a friend who's if he's listening to this right now, he's like throwing his phone across the room, or if he's watching it, he's like you know shadow boxing with the screen because he really loves Clark Ashton Smith.
Well, again, I don't want to yuck anybody's yum, you know.
Yeah.
But it's just one that's not for me. Um,
Mhm.
so again, for the putative 12-year-old listening to this, um, you don't you don't need to give a lecture on this, but could you sketch out how these pulp stories, these interwar pulp stories, became an influence on Dungeons and Dragons?
I believe Gygax and Dave Arneson, they both read. Well, I think Gygax specifically, in the works I've read about Gygax's life, he had pulp magazines. He had specifically Weird Tales. He was reading Weird Tales and Arkham House reprints of Weird Tales authors, and then Arneson read comics. A lot of the comics, in they were directly influenced by like think like pre-code comics. They're influenced by the Weird Tales writers and the horror and the weird science fiction. So that's how I think it gets in the direct way because they're actually reading those works. But yeah.
And again, the example I always pop off with in my head is Three Hearts, Three Lines by Poole Anderson, which I don't think it's post-war, obviously.
Hmm.
Uh, but man, you get an awful lot of things in D&D kind of taken directly from that. Order versus Chaos. Gosh, I
Hmm.
want to say the Paladin was from that. Again, I read it a few years ago.
Hmm.
But that's why we're having someone who's an expert in pulp fiction on here to just kind of talk shop.
Yeah.
So do you think that that literature translates well to 2025?
Um, that's so to circle back to what I said about not wanting to so put really racist interwar pulp fiction in front of like 18, 19-year-olds and like let's say I'm teaching a freshman level composition course. Might not be the place to read that. Now, with that said, because I want people to think I'm like not, being academic here, there's a time and a place to read that. Like if we were reading like a between the wars literature class, like 300 level, we might look at a passage from the Tower of the Elephant or the Queen of the Black Coast and like talk about how it's part of this specific moment. But should you, is it still worth your time to read? Absolutely. I can recommend stories with the disclaimer, with the Warner Brothers cartoon disclaimer that there's going to be some stuff in there that you might find offensive. But not to dwell on that, but I think there's some great storytelling, particularly Robert E. Howard, obviously, like Solomon Kane. Um, I don't know. Are you familiar with Solomon Kane?
I mean, only the idea of him. So again, if you could tell the 12-year-olds listening who Solomon King, Solomon or Solomon?
I always say Solomon,
Hey, you're the
like
professor,
King
so I'll
Solomon.
copy you.
I don't
Solomon.
think there's a correct way. I'm sure there have been nerds who've debated if it's Solomon or Solomon Kane, but it's Solomon, like King Solomon, because he's very much like a biblical sort of figure. He's a 16th or 17th century. I think he's loose with this timeline. Um, Puritan warrior, and he is basically like there's a direct gaming influence, not a Dungeons and Dragons gaming influence, but like the witch hunter archetype in Warhammer Fantasy. That's basically Solomon Kane. If if you know that gaming trope of the witch hunter, that's Solomon Kane, right? He's writing injustices, but he's also like he uses like pistols and rapier, and his setting is historical. He's not like Conan. Conan is a pre history, like a fictional prehistory, the Hyborian age. But Solomon Kane he actually is in this uh, it's in Europe and Africa and uh, I wish I could. It was the 16th or 17th. I think it's the 17th century. I think it's the 1600s. So
And why would you recommend that in particular, or what do you enjoy about it?
it's just uh it's so weird. It's like it's just well, first off, just in terms of the, content aside, like the storytelling is if you're a writer, it's worth your time to read it just as like a craft study because the characterization is so economic. Um, the action scenes, they're Robert E. Howard makes a lot of times. I don't know if you've experienced this when you're reading fiction. A lot of action scenes your eyes have to gloss over. If there's just too much action, like that's not the case. Like I think Howard's action is his violence is almost like it's beautifully written. It kind of sounds like a paradox, but it is beautifully written.
Well, I was at GaryCon this past weekend,
Hmm.
and one of the Chaosium guys, who of course call it Cthulhu,
Oh yeah.
mentioned that he was going back and rereading, I think, Robert E. Howard. And he said, when you think about Robert E. Howard in your head, you have one idea about how he writes violence. But when you go back and actually look at it again, the way he
Hmm.
writes violence and handles it is much different than what you probably remember. He's much quicker, much faster, much more brutal. You don't have long fight scenes in Conan stories, was what he was getting at.
Yeah. Yeah. Just in a couple of sentences, the scene is completely changed and there's a few people dead. What I mean? It's pretty it's not like I've gotten in the habit of reading a lot of like bad gaming tie-in fiction. I shouldn't say bad, but just it's not the most artistically ambitious, like I've been reading a lot of Black Library stuff. And
And what's the Black Library?
oh, you don't know it's the Warhammer fiction. Like 40K, Warhammer 40K, Warhammer Fantasy. It's older now, the old world. And there's something that happens in those novels. If they, I'm gripped, because I know the lore. It's like, but something that happens where you get oversaturation of action. It's just like every chapter is just everyone is like the attention is dialed up to a 10 the entire time, and it's just after a while you just get numb to it. Howard's not like that. So-
Well, violence in a role-playing game. Um, I prefer role-playing games where you can kind of die at any time,
Mhm.
uh, and you need to be careful. Uh, like low-level D&D, I find to be much more fun than high-level D&D
Mhm.
because if you have 100 hit points, people just take it less seriously.
Mhm.
Um, so I think the same is true of literature, where if you're going to have fight after fight after fight after fight, and the main character has their plot armor on the whole time, it's just not interesting. There are
Mhm.
no stakes. So, again, I think Howard does that very, very well.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say like that term plot armor, wasn't completely that's a term that my students have been using more and more these days. I'm not sure when it entered into popular uh you know discourse, but it's a really useful term. Um but yeah, D&D where you can die. There's it actually, if I can speculate a little bit, there is there's a paranoia is part of the atmosphere of a Conan story. And actually, that goes back to the pre-Conan Call. This is the first serpent people story. Call of Eleusia. That it's in the court and there's shadows and there's people plotting to overthrow this barbarian king. So there's this, like, I think it's part of sword and sorcery fiction is paranoia, right? Like there's always a threat, and I feel like that's part of early Dungeons and Dragons. Is this, at any time, things could go really bad. Um, obviously it's not just Howard, Fritz Leiber, the Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser stories. The characters always have reason to be paranoid. You get like there's always enemies that are outside of they're not present. So like the Thieves Guild and the rat people who live underground. Like there's always like monsters and threats that are kind of off scene. If you're using film, like they're out of frame. You know, that seems like it's part of sword and sorcery fiction.
So I hit record on this because you said that you had watched a Manson family documentary and that it was fascinating, and I was like,
Yeah.
okay, we're stumbling into the good stuff here. I better hit record.
Oh gosh.
So let me ask you. So what can you tell us about this Manson family documentary?
Um. Well. So it's called Chaos, and it it you learn some interesting. I had no idea, for example, that um you know, was it Charles Manson's psychologist was part of the MK Ultra um world, right? So I don't know his name. I'm not an expert. I just watched a documentary, right? But like he had a client clinic relationship with a doctor who was also associated with the CIA and MK Ultra and LST. Right? So like that already is like what the heck? So
So
like
again, for the 12-year-olds, let me quickly shout out MK Ultra was an effort by the CIA to develop brainwashing and mind control techniques.
yeah,
They ended up giving LSD to a lot of businessmen in brothels in San Francisco. A guy killed himself, and by
yeah.
odd coinkydink, I was listening to a video on MK Ultra today,
Oh my
and in
gosh.
and in it, a one of the doctors participating in the experiments described MK Ultra as fun, fun, fun.
Oh God. Well,
Please continue Charles Manson and MK Ultra in the CIA.
Well, that's the big reveal of the documentary is that there's this connection between MK Ultra and the family, the Manson family. This, and when he was in court, the young women. I'm sorry for you said 12-year-olds. I didn't know there were 12-year-olds. I don't want to like keep anybody up late
I
if
mean,
they're
I think this is a PG-13 podcast. It's
okay.
fine.
Okay. Well, this is murders, right? There were murders, horrible murders. Lots of people were killed. A pregnant woman was killed. Like it was is absolutely tragic. Um, and they got off, right? They were eventually released from jail because I take that back. I think there were I don't know all of the details, but there were other people who I think died in prison. But anyhow, the defense was Manson was using mind control on them. Like this is part of the popular culture of the you guys. I'm not sure how much is common knowledge or whatever. Um,
I'm,
that's MK Ultra is about mind control, right? There's this doctor. He has this relationship with this murderer who supposedly mind controlled people to kill. Does this to see what I'm trying to? Is my tinfoil hat on? Like I don't know. The documentary is making these connections. It's on Netflix, so I'm not watching this on like YouTube or something. So
I mean, I have a grim view. No, now I'm rambling off too. I'm scrolling through people.com,
Uh-huh.
hoping to get a fast answer on what happened to all the people in the Manson family, and it certainly
Hmm.
looks like very different answers for different people involved.
Yeah.
Um, but
I'm not
it's
really into true crime. Like it creeps me out. Like I'll read, sword and sorcery, science fiction, aliens getting blown up, like graphic descriptions of violent Game of Thrones, for example. But like the moment like my wife is listening to actual accounts of this stuff, it's different for me. I'm not sure why.
like, you ever talked to Joseph Laycock?
Mm-mm.
He's a doctor in, a doctor of, gosh, I think religion or philosophy in Texas.
Oh.
And we had him on probably about a year ago, because a thing that he says is that games like D&D create a space outside of the world from which it is safe to examine the world itself. And I'm guessing you could say the same thing about genre fiction and fantasy fiction and horror stuff. I mean,
Hmm.
really every horror is a mythologized version of a real thing, right? Like the
Hmm.
classical vampire is the rapist.
Hmm.
Um, and it's a safe way of talking about the fear of the rapist without actually invoking the rapist. So I mean,
Hmm.
it certainly makes sense to me that you could consume genre fiction all day long, and yet have true crime give you the ick. Because I'm similar.
Hmm.
My wife, oh God, she loves it. She is all about it, and I am like I read one book about the Golden State Killer. I think that's the
Hmm.
guy's name. Um, it was good, but I'm like that is plenty for me.
Yeah. Eh, I I 100% believe that there is an important relationship between the real and like literature of the unreal or genre like television, comic books. Like I think that it's a complicated relationship. Like what is the nature of allegory, Um is we for so we're going to some deep territory here. Robert E. Howard committed suicide, right? Conan lives in battle on the razor's edge of death. Like he has giant melancholies. He's very depressed. Like arguably Conan is an allegory for like fighting against depression, right? And then Robert E. Howard, he commits suicide. So like, um, the point to there is a connection between the fantastical, the science fictional, the strange, the real, and they're connected. I'm not sure what that relationship is, but for some reason, it's different when I'm hearing like reports of like detailed descriptions of like burglaries that ended up in you know murders. It's different than reading a Conan story where he's burglaring a rich noble's house and murders him.
So you're saying there that you think that the writing of Conan could have had a kind of therapeutic effect on Robert E. Howard.
Hmm. Oh yeah, yeah. I think a lot of writers, artistically ambitious writers, that if they're putting themselves in it, then it definitely is serving some sort of psychological like therapeutic function. Like there's a psychodrama there. Yeah.
Hmm.
And that's not me. There's a lot of spilled ink about this. I mean, it goes back to Freud. He wrote an essay about daydreaming and has this concept called sublimation, like where you you get really angry at your boss and instead of like punching your boss, you daydream about punching your boss. You know what I mean? And then he connects that to fiction writers. Sublimation is where you stay pro-social, but you indulge in antisocial impulses through this, you know. A lot of times it's art or, you know, this and that. But
I was raised Catholic, um, and as such, my mother was very interested in my mental hygiene.
hmm,
And there was a lot of
that's funny.
media. That's funny. A lot of what media could be consumed and what media could not be consumed. And it was the 80s, so the Satanic Panic was in full flower. and there was a definite like uh belief that if you read the wrong thing or saw the wrong thing, it could in some way destroy you,
Hmm.
and ruin you going forward.
Hmm.
Um, so I when I went into adolescence and I started reading more widely, it made reading feel very naughty.
That's funny. That's
I know,
awesome.
and it kind of is, isn't it though?
Hmm.
The idea that like, oop, better watch out because if you read the wrong thing, you might break your mind. But it
Hmm.
does also say that reading is clearly powerful and important and can really have an impact on its consumer. And again, from the
Hmm.
age of 46, I think that all of those fears were about kind of a fear of atheism in some way,
Hmm.
shape, or form, and the fear that you would consume so much knowledge that you would fall away from the Catholic faith
Hmm.
as you just became better read. It may be a realistic fear, uh,
Hmm.
but as I age and as we're talking about the power of literature and its influence on people, again, I grew up with this idea that literature could have a huge impact on its readers.
Hmm.
Now at the age of 46, I'm like, I'm not sure that I believe that anymore. Or that it can have a large impact on lots of people. Because I'm just going to say this. Given how many people read The Hunger Games and Harry Potter, I would think the world would look different today than it
Yeah.
does.
Yeah, no, no, I think that this is something that the pandemic brought home to me. Like I read so much during the pandemic, so many like novels. I shouldn't call them crappy. I keep being pretentious. Oh, they're crappy because people spent years writing these like these novels that I read. So I'm sorry if you wrote one of those novels and heard me say that. Don't be upset with me. I understand. I get it. But at the same time, it's like it's just like watching TV. You know what I mean? Like a lot of times it's like if you spend like 20 hours binging a um what show can I pick on? Like an anime or something. Like I'm currently watching Berserk.
Attack on Titan.
Okay, there you go. Like it's uh, is it really that I mean you might learn something from Attack on Titan. You know what I mean? Like there's some really compelling philosophical ideas that are explored, but yeah, I don't know. I the idea there's some 19th century literary critic Matthew Arnold, and he was one of the first defenders of reading secular literature as this, making you into a better person.
Hmm.
And I don't know. I don't know if it makes you into a better or worse person. I don't know. I'm with you. Maybe I'm becoming cynical. I'm not sure what effect it has on me. I think it's a better time. I think reading fiction, no matter what it is probably better um, than like scrolling on Facebook. Anything like social media. Like it will just it affects your cognition in a certain way. At least when you're reading with a book, the 2 pages and the boards, you're focusing attention in a certain way. So it's a kind of meditative in that way. But I don't know.
So one of my antidotes to doom scrolling has been I started reading the complete run of the Fantastic Four, starting with uh,
Nice.
Stan Lee and Jack Kirby's run back in, I think it was 1961 it came out. Um, and I'm like 15 issues in, and again, it is kind of trashy. Like it might be trashier than you would even think.
Hmm.
And again, of the issues I've read 15. Five are probably okay to good. The other 10, you're like, this was very disposable entertainment for the time. Um, but I would say I at least feel like I have something to think about.
Hmm.
It's not something that brings me down, and at least it'll give me some sort of frame for the Fantastic Four movie when it comes out.
Yeah.
Um, but so were you saying earlier that you think what you read is as important as the act of reading itself?
I I'm not sure if I said that, but I think the act of reading is intrinsically probably worth your time compared to other things. I think you can overdo it, just like you can like watch too much TV or whatever. Um, but I'm starting to think that maybe maybe this is because I'm in my 40s now. Like you only have so much time. You have to choose what you
Hmm.
can attend to and what books you're not going to read. I'm surrounded by Because I've read a lot of comic books. Oh, can I say something about the 1960s comics? Is I'm
I'd love
surprised
to.
by how much text is in those. Like those are so literary compared to like contemporary comics. Like it's interesting how you know you can sit down and read a comic from your pull list today and just get through it in 10 minutes. You pick up one of those older comics. I've been reading Arok, Son of Thunder. It's like early, I think it's 70s. And it takes you like 30 minutes to read one issue, because there's so much text.
Yeah, I would concur completely because I was certainly like, oh, I'm just going to fly through the Fantastic Four. But
Hmm.
no. And like at the beginning of some issues, Stan Lee will write a book-length adventure. And you're
Yeah.
like, I can see that. Like,
Yeah.
I can see where you're going with that, Stan.
Yeah.
Um, so in my early 20s, um, I had a friend who I will, I guess, keep nameless on this podcast. I'll call him Mark because there's a book by a guy named Mark in front of me.
Hmm.
And Mark was a heavy metal dude, really into guar, really
Oh yeah.
into trauma pictures, finding the most obscure kind of vile media to consume.
Oh, that's an
Um,
interesting topic.
well, and again, I think he was kind of doing what I was doing, where he was like, "Oh, this is forbidden in some way. There must be some knowledge there. I will
Yeah.
rush into the forbidden and see what I can learn." And he picked up at Barnes and Noble one day in like I'm gonna say 2003, a copy of Thus Spake Zarathustra by Nietzsche.
Hmm.
He read 5 pages, and it fostered a psychological break.
Oh my gosh.
His entire world changed from that day on. He broke up with his girlfriend. He started seeing a psychologist. He dropped my entire friend group. Like within 6 months, I was no longer friends with him. Um,
The
and
Necronomicon or something.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. And again, I'm pretty sure. Have you read Thus Spake Zarathustra?
It's been a while, but I have read it. Yeah, like I think I was like 19 when I read it. It's the one where it's almost it's like a novel almost. Like there's this
It's supposed to be a
prophet.
novel, but yeah. So,
Yeah,
so Zarathustra comes down from the
yeah,
mountain.
yeah.
He comes into a town and he starts teaching. But the first thing that
He
happens
meets
when he
Saint Francis at one point.
oh, does he? I
He
don't remember
encounters
that.
Saint Francis. Yeah,
Huh.
yeah.
Do you happen to recall what happens when he goes to the town for, the first time though?
He just like tells everybody they suck, doesn't he?
No. So he comes upon a trapeze act.
Oh, okay.
Um, and there's this trapeze artist trying to go from one window to another. And there's some demon character that leaps out of a window, shakes the wire the trapeze artist is on, and he falls to his death.
Oh my
And
gosh.
Zarathustra rushes over uh, to the dying man. And I forget who says it here, but there's these lines that go, uh, there is no God and there is no hell. I leave nothing when I leave life. I am not much more than an animal that has been taught to dance by blows and starvation.
Mm.
And I don't know that that's what he read, but
Yeah.
you can see how it's fairly grim stuff if you're kind of going into whatever you would describe Nietzsche's philosophy as unprepared. I
Yeah.
suppose nihilism, but it's funny. I've read a lot of Nietzsche in the past like 5 years. For all the reading I've done, I don't know that I could summarize what he says or
Hmm.
succinctly give you ideas about him. Like even when you get into his comment stuff, like God is dead, and it's like, well, he did say that, but like he then went on to talk about how like guilty people should feel for killing God. Like
Yeah.
every the dime store Nietzsche is different than than reading the whole text. But anyway, when thinking about the strength of literature, I oftentimes think about my friend Mark. Even as again, I am like, or somebody said that poets are the secret Senate. Maybe it's just that literature is long term.
Yeah.
Maybe we just haven't seen the fruits of consuming all this delightful genre fiction that's been published in the past 25 years. Or maybe genre fiction, maybe no fiction has any power over anyone at all. I don't know. I don't know, man. What do you think?
I, now I'm trying to remember that quote about the poets being the legislatures of
Let
the
me look. I'll
world.
look it up while you're
I
thinking.
think it was Shelley or Coleridge. It was one of the two. It was from one of their like famous essays of like literary criticism.
According to AI, it's Shelley
There
from
you
A
go.
Defense of Poetry.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean it's so interesting because like there are texts that are that kind of have this dangerous reputation, like Catcher in the Rye and Ayn Rand. Like a lot of people like, oh, if I see like like a young person reading Ayn Rand, I'm like, oh, I'm not sure, or um, but I don't know. I'm just nowadays it's like I feel like that role is being fulfilled. I'm becoming social commentator now. I think that role of like the dangerous uh demagogue or whatever is no longer like the written text anymore. It's like the YouTuber or like the person on social media like like spreading I don't know. But that's like I it's weird because in my I feel like I'm stammering. Your poor listeners are like, gosh, this guy needs to get to his point. The point is like
No, this is going really well.
I I feel like I've been spending like most of my time in my career like critiquing the literary canon, and I the reason why I thought the literary canon was a problem was because it seems like it was like the storehouse of an aristocracy's values, and that when we just kind of uncritically accept the canon as like, oh, of course you need to read Shelley, of course need to read Shakespeare and Charles
Homer.
Dickens and stuff, right? Like that, there's a naivete there that it kind of it always, I don't know why, right? Why do we need to read what the president of Harvard tells us that we need to read? Uh, but now I'm starting to realize that I I feel like the canon, the literary canon, and I'm not. This is not a defense of the canon, but I think that it was a collaborative enterprise. It there's a naive view of seeing the canon as just like it's just one or two people, this like cabal who are just forcing you to read the text they want you to read for ideological purposes.
It's
I think,
Harold Bloom, isn't it?
yeah, no, it's Harold Bloom, and he's back there just telling you that you need to read Ursula K. Le Guin, right?
God,
Uh,
he's crotchety.
yeah, he did include Ursula K. Le Guin in his canon,
He
which
did,
is
but that's just
yeah.
because she was nice to him.
Yeah. And then so I think that's naive of me. What I'm starting to realize is that like reading together is important, right? Like reading by yourself, like reading is a collaboration, it's that's why I think gaming is really cool too, because it's like collaborative storytelling. Like we tend to think like writing is this thing that you do all by yourself in an attic. We think reading is something you just have the book in front of you. But if you go back to like the site of like the rise of literacy in Europe it happened place in this like coffee houses, printed material, and it became cheap. People had to share copies. The first literary criticism, was also at the same time people were starting to read widely, like fiction. So I don't know. Maybe a better way of thinking about the canon is that it's like there's this canonical impulse, which is like that we need to adjudicate what's worth our time together to read. I don't know. That's where I am right now. Um, did I
What was the
answer your
last thing?
question?
Sir, what was the last thing you said about adjudicating?
Like judging what's worth our time to read, right? It's not like and we get to do that together. And we do that when we ask our friends like what are you reading? Like what's something I should read, right? Like um uh, like that it's it seems like canonical status of literature. It used to just be like it's natural. You don't question it. It just read it. Your English teacher tells you to read it, right? Now it's like, well, I don't trust that, right? I want to have a reason why this is worth my time, my finite attention. But I think there's another way of thinking about canonical status, which is that it's a group of people, maybe even like a society or a culture, collaborating together to say this is worth our time, you know?
So a couple of years ago, my wife started setting out to read 52, 54 books a year.
Hmm.
Um, and I am very jealous of her. Because she just goes on Goodreads, talks to friends, gets recommendations, and just
Yeah.
starts plowing through stuff. And again, a lot you could argue a lot of it might be lowbrow. But again, she enjoys it, she delights in it, and here I am reading the Fantastic Four. So who am I to cast any dispersions on anything about anything, on anyone about anything? Um, and she will recommend books to me, and typically I'll go and read one, but
Hmm.
uh like if I try and recommend a book to her, she's almost always like, "It's just some nerd stuff, isn't it?"
That's hilarious.
I'm resentful. It's a problem in our relationship. I'm like, well, I'll try your books, but you won't
Uh,
try mine.
I can completely relate. You know, my wife, we don't really recommend each other fiction anymore. We'll watch shows together. Like we just watched um, Severance. Everybody's watching Severance right now.
Hmm.
But yeah, no, our reading since graduate school has like completely, it's just went in completely different directions. I tried to get her to read the Horus Heresy, Warhammer 40K, and she got through a couple of chapters and she said it smells like a locker room. Like what do you mean by that? It's like it is like a pretty macho book, but
A pretty macho book. Would you recommend the Horus Heresy?
I think the Horus Heresy is like Miltonic. Like I think it's like it has no business being that good. Like well, how about this? The first three novels. I've read at least I think I got through about 20 of them before I stopped reading. And they get really expensive. They start to become collectible. Unless you want to read them on Kindle or something, you're going to be dropping a lot. You know, like it's kind of ridiculous, like $60 for mass market paperback. But the first three are gorgeous. I mean, they're like philosophical. You know, like they're it's like John Milton's Paradise Lost. It's like a modern retelling of that mythology, I'd say.
One author or like a
Human at
different
war.
author for
What's that?
one author or a different author for every book?
Different author for every book. The first one is Dan Abnett, who's like a one of the best Black Library Warhammer authors. The second one is oh my gosh, um, I can't remember his name. Um, I could go over my shelf and pick it up, but I'm not.
Don't worry
I'm
about it.
not
It's fine.
yeah,
So the first Horus Heresy book by Dan Avnet.
Dan Abnett, Abnett,
All
Dan
right,
Abnett.
I'll find a link and put it in the show notes. Link
Yeah.
to first Horus Heresy book.
I should say I'm like it's um almost 10 in Virginia, and I was up. This is the defense of any sort of scattered thoughts. I was up at 6 a.m. I rode my bike to work and taught all day, and I'm like,
You're doing great.
and I'm cutting back on coffee. I'm like,
Oh, that's see, my reward for recording it because I'm in Wisconsin. My reward for recording at 8 is I give myself a Coca-Cola. I'm
oh,
like,
okay,
get a little caffeine, get a little sugar, like because otherwise I have that same like I could be reading the Fantastic Four in bed right now.
yeah,
Even though I am like I get to talk to Jason. It's amazing. But yeah, this has been a again personally just a dark 2025.
hmm
So, and again, I guess I should explain a little bit where that's coming from. So uh, I had a student who graduated in 2022, and I speak, I teach
hmm
seventh and eighth grade.
hmm
Um, so he's now 17 years old, and it certainly appears as though he murdered his parents
Oh my God.
and then like lived in the house with the bodies for a while. Then he took the car, the dog, and like drove across 5 states before finally being arrested in Kansas for I think a have driving a vehicle that wasn't his.
Shh.
Um, he gets extradited up here to Wisconsin, and you know, again, I had him when he was 12, 13, 14 years old. I sat in
Mhm.
conferences with his parents. And at first it was maybe he didn't do it, but and again maybe he still didn't do it. He has
Mhm.
not even been charged as far as I know. Although it's certainly, I mean, he had the gun with him in the car. Like it doesn't look good. Um, but again, I kind of think about like I sat in a room with that kid for 2 years. Like,
Mhm.
was that sitting in there? Should I go visit the kid? Like, I've had kids in who ended up in prison or in jail before, and I've gone to visit them, but
Oh my gosh.
I've never had anyone commit murder before.
Mhm.
Um, and it is grim. You know,
Yeah.
again, I don't know, like I don't know how you feel as a teacher, but uh and again, I'm like, should I go visit him? Because further compounding everything. So he and his mother came here from Moldova in 2017. And his father was his stepfather. Uh, so as far as I know, he has killed all the family he has in America. Um,
Mm.
so I'm like, who is even going to, you know, is anybody going to visit this kid? Like the high school he's at didn't even notice he wasn't there.
Mhm.
Um, so again, it's just really personally grim, dark, leads you to unpleasant thoughts at
Yeah,
midnight.
man. Yeah, I can't even. Well, I've had students who've taken their life. Like I did use the plural, but I've been doing this since 2006. I was a TA in 2006 and got my job in 2014, and that's just it's it that's hard enough, but I can't even imagine. I had a friend who got arrested for punching someone, so like a colleague in a graduate school. I'm sorry, I'm not making light of this, but like
No, it's fine.
we
I'm not
always
making light
thought
of
that
this.
there was something like, because he was really intense and he would kind of, and then he stopped coming to classes and we're like, what? He punched, I think he punched a cop or something. It was like
Oh
real,
God.
but yeah, so that's I just I've never known, not even like one uh, step removed of anybody who's committed a violent crime like that. Like that's crazy.
See, I had a student die in surgery once, and that was not good. Um, but there might be an element of like cosmic evil in that. Like, how can this young person be taken from us at this age when their life is just getting started?
Yeah.
But there's not this element of like human evil.
Hmm.
Um, Again, it depends on your mileage may vary, but to me that's the thing I'm having a hard time processing here. And I hope the public defenders bring something to light that could somehow explain this, but how do you explain it? And
Yeah. Well,
uh,
that's going back to our conversation about true crime.
that was what got me started. I'm like, oh, we
Yeah.
gotta we gotta hit record.
Yeah. Is this idea of like I feel like in the gaming zone, there's the possibility of like, you know, projecting meaning onto the static, onto the chaos, and then like maybe like the real world, there is no like the potential for like projecting meaning onto it is like it's you might do it for a short period of time. You might hold to meaning it, there for a little bit, but then like ultimately, unless of course you're a believer in this and that organized religion or like established philosophy, like disciple of a philosophy or something. But um, I don't know.
I mean, I certainly find that literature and gaming help add meaning to life.
Hmm.
And again, it's funny because you if like I'm playing Numenera right now. Like my buddy Don is running Numenera, and you'd be hard pressed to grab me after a single session and say, "So how did this add meaning to your life?"
Hmm.
You fought LSD jungle cats essentially, where like if they scratch you, you hallucinate, and then if you kill them, you can harvest the LSD from their claws or whatever.
Yeah.
So tell me again how this is adding meaning to your life. And
Hmm.
yet, in the aggregate, I certainly think it does. Like for me, I'm guessing the meaning in this comes from my character. It's a bunch of
Hmm.
mid 40s guys playing, and everybody is like 18 to 24 except for me. I'm
Hmm.
playing a 45-year-old who's living at home with his mom, has failed at everything in life.
Wait, this is your character?
This is my character, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, in
why?
in, in Numenera. I think you'd need a Freud to figure that out. Maybe it has to do with imposter syndrome, Jason. Uh, and again, I'm not living at home with my mother,
Yeah, yeah.
my mother who forbade me to read anything by H.P. Lovecraft.
Hmm.
Um, but
That's
yeah, I think that would be where if you were gonna look for meaning, that I'm processing something there. Like
mhm.
we played 2 nights ago. No, we played last night, and my character said at one point, my mother is perfect, but she does not love me. Everyone at the table is like, "What are you doing here, dude?" You're really
It's,
processing some things. You
oh,
playing anything? Sure, go ahead.
no, I was just thinking about this, like, because, uh, you know, when you make a character for any game, it could be a video game, it could be a role-playing game, like a CRPG or a tabletop role-playing game. You always have the choice of like, am I going to be making an alternative persona, right? Like kind of a who I want to be, like, or usually it's gender, right? Am I going to play the male or the female? If I make a male character, it's like I'm going to make this, and I know people will be like, "This isn't how I make my character." Shut up! Don't say. But I think it's with the male character, it's like, who do I want to be? I'm kind of like, this is actually my avatar. Whereas when I make the character that's not my gender, it's like there's unfortunately I think there's a little bit of objectification. Like this is my chess piece that is like I'm making this character and realizing it so that, and I think this comes through in video games too, where like when people are making their, if you're uh you know an old man like me, like you make a female character, it's like you're making her sexy, right? Does that make sense? Like I know that's like people are like, what is he talking about? But like you're making like a, it's not your avatar, it's like your thing. You know what I mean? And this
I
is,
mean,
and I know, I understand this is horrible. You know what I mean?
I
But
don't
like,
know.
but then if you're making your like big, your barbarian character, it's like that's who I am. So I'm thinking like, what I'm drawing a distinction between two, approaches to avatarhood, right? One is like, this is who I want to be, this ambition, this aspirational figure. The other is like this object that I want to possess. Um,
I have oftentimes thought to myself, when we sit down to play a role-playing game,
Mhm.
what are we really doing? Like, are we really pretending just to be elves for 4 hours a week and
Mhm.
we keep coming back because we really want to pretend to be an elf? But
Mhm.
I've never asked myself before the question, what are we really doing when we create a character? Which is a
Mhm.
fascinating question to ask.
Yeah.
Um, because and again, I'm usually the GM, the DM, so I'm not very often making a character. And like
Mhm.
the the character I'm playing right now, I've probably played for 4 or 5 months, which is like the longest amount of time. I think I played a character in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. I don't even know. Um, so the observation that oftentimes we will either enact fantasies for ourselves or kind of create a sexual object for or a desirous object or an erotic object.
A
Oh,
fetish in
yeah,
in the Freudian term,
yeah.
like
Although I will point out, have you played with many women?
I know you're gonna. I have my game group. It's like half women. Um,
So do you find that if they play a man, they create a erotic object?
I know you can't generalize, but it's been my experience that when they play, they often forget to assign a gender to their characters.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, like the two uh regular players and there's a third who plays. They'll often make a character, and then they'll just be playing, and they kind of play the character in this androgynous way. You know what I mean? And then it's like if we ever come down to role playing, then they're like, oh yeah, I'm a guy, or like I'm a, it's intriguing. So
See, I've been playing with my work just happened to be blessed with a ton of women under 30 that play D&D. So I've
hmm
played a lot of games with women under 30 in the past 4 years.
hmm
And every single one, when I brought them to the table, they played a dude. I never
hmm
had a woman play a woman. And they typically seem to be, again, I've never thought of this in kind of a general way before, but it did seem like every single one of them wanted to embrace some sort of masculine ideal.
hmm
And again, I don't know that that means anything, but when I was thinking about it, I was just like, it'd be hard for me to take those characters and say, well, it's either an ideal them or an erotic object of because maybe I'm wrong, but it just didn't have that vibe at the table. But again, now we're here's two mid-40s guys talking about how do women create characters.
Yeah, I know. Well, I think
To have a woman on, just ask her, right?
yeah, I know. Like the observation I made probably applies more to video games because, or video game like TTRPGs. Like there are some dungeon crawl TTRPGs that are almost, the way they're played. Like when we play D&D, the guy who DMs our campaign, it's almost like it's like a dungeon crawl, like leveling up, and we role play,
It's
but
pretty gamist and
yeah,
survivalist and
yeah. But other TTRPG experiences that are much more like role playing, like um we were playing the Blade Runner RPG, right? That's where I get really nuanced and granular about like my character's background, and think about my gender performance, and I think about the psychodramas of my character, right? So like any generalizations I made about TTRPGs probably don't hold up when you jump from different types of games. Yeah.
yeah. Well,
The Blade Runner
I
RPG is very much it's one of those kind of more like heavy role playing games.
we've managed to fill an hour. Let me ask you, is there anything of yours that can be purchased that will send royalties to you? Should people fly to your university and enroll? How could they support your work?
Well, I do want to. I told you I wanted to talk about this. I started this subreddit, the Sword and Sorcery subreddit, like 10 years ago now, or,
Oh
or
wow.
so, and I was all excited when it broke 1,000 uh, subscribers. But like recently, it's just been blowing up. It's like 17,000 now, and so this is Sword and Sorcery subreddit. But then I started a Discord associated with it. That's because so much of the content on that Sword and Sorcery subreddit is gaming content. So I'm like, it'd be cool to have like a community because there are people who are enthusiastic about Sword and Sorcery literature who are also into gaming, and it would be cool just to give people a place to congregate, like who are both the literary enthusiasts and the gaming enthusiasts, because it's not always the case that the people who are into literature are also into gaming. And there's a Discord on that subreddit that you can link to. I have
That's
it
really
pinned
interesting.
right now. I'm the mod of that, so I will
So
pitch
you
that.
okay, so should let me I'll link to Sword and Sorcery subreddit.
Hmm.
And could you send me a link to the Discord or no?
Oh yeah, I can. A lot of those Discord invite links, they end up
Like,
breaking for some reason.
yeah, even when you set them to never expire, they seem to
Yeah,
expire,
yeah,
which is really odd.
yeah.
Um, but hey, send me like for the Discord on my Patreon, it seems like it expires once a year. Somebody
Hmm.
then writes me an email being like, "Hey, the link is bad," and then I go and fix it and we're good again for a while. But Um, on that note, if you are a Patreon subscriber to this fine podcast, you will gain access to our Discord. On that Discord, I am very slowly digitizing my entire TTRPG history archive. Uh, I think I put up almost all the data for Forgotten Realms, uh, I can't remember what else, but like 94, 95, 96, like almost all the sales numbers I have for a few lines and novels are up there. Um, I recently released a discussion that historian Matt Shoemaker had with Gen Con owner Peter Adkison. They talked about the history of Gen Con as Peter is stepping away from the business. Also up there you have an episode where Sandy Peterson discusses Cthulhu with Ken Hite. Um, and this past weekend at GaryCon, Scott Bruner and I interviewed Zeb Cook in Hugh Hefner's suite. And we have
That's hilarious.
it's amazing. We're sitting in front of a fireplace. There's a bar in the corner. The audience is all on recliners and on sofas.
Are you
Outside, we
wearing
see
robes?
we should be, but no, we didn't plan that far ahead. I was just glad I had a video camera to record the moment. And the only way that you will get that interview is if you become a Patreon subscriber. Give us $3 a month, and you get access to all of that. I'm going to keep getting up special episodes. I'm going to keep getting historical documents up, and our marketing plan is to never go more than $3. I mean, maybe for inflation at some point, but we're going to try and stick to one tier about the price of a cup of coffee. You buy us a cup of coffee to support the podcast, and we're going to do what we can to give you cool extra content. There will be a link in the show notes along with the link to all this other cool stuff that Professor Carney told us about.
Hmm.
Any last thing you want to say before we just say goodbye?
Um, Not really, other than, if I've said anything that has offended anybody, please accept my apologies. I was tired. I don't know what I even said, to be completely honest.
I mean, well, that's very nice of you.
Yeah.
I mean, I would tell you, from my point of view, the most controversial thing that that people might ding you for is
Not remembering the second author of the Horse Heresy.
exactly. That's right. That's it right there. So, listeners, thank you so much. Jason, thank you so much. And you all have a good night, okay?
Bye-bye.